first state witness. But are the limits, or are there, maybe we should be asking, limits to how far a cross-examiner can push a witness? Well, to discuss this, we are joined by the director at the Women's Legal Center, Siham Samai. Good evening, Siham. Thanks very much for your time. Are there limits to how far a defense lawyer can push a witness?
Well, before I start, the sad reality is that our criminal justice system does subject women to secondary victimization, and the trauma and it's highlighted through this particular process. This case highlights that we do need some serious transformation of the system, because it's not victim-centered and it's not victim-friendly. But for any defense, we know that a defense attorney, the most important role is to be able to mount a defense for his or her client. But the defense should not be conducted in a manner where it violates the rights of the survivor of violence. So at the end of the day, the survivor need not be subjected to violent cross-examination in order to discredit her account of what happened. That is not necessary. So the graphic nature of the questioning being posed in this manner is obviously of deep concern to many attorneys as well as the Women's Legal Center, because it highlights that stereotypes are being used to be able to check or to the veracity of what the victim or survivor is saying. So certain of the questioning was completely unacceptable.
Now, you have, for example, the Gender Equality Commission saying it's approaching the General Counsel of the Bar as well as the Magistrates Commission. From what you know, are these two organizations, for example, or will they be able to deal with the questions, with what they are being asked to do, given the legal provisions and what is taken to be the way to go about dealing with witnesses?
Well, the appropriate institution which obviously regulates the attorney's conduct is the Law Society. The Legal Practice Council. But at the end of the day, and it won't be the Magistrate Commission, because we've seen how the magistrate actually intervened to be able to stop the type of questioning which we thought was appropriate. And we do see that there was a failure from the NPA to object to the type of questioning. And we believe that the NPA or the prosecutor should have played a much more vigorous role in trying to protect the survivor, and that has been a major challenge. But seeing that the Commission of Gender Equality will in all probability make a submission to the Law Society, and to be able to see whether or not the conduct of the attorney actually brought the profession in disrepute, because the question that we need to ask is, was this questioning invasive? Was it inappropriate? Was it unrelated to the crime that had to be proven? And like I've said before, the court has the authority to insist that the defense attorney move on questions that are irrelevant or which is inappropriate, and can assist with that type of questioning, and it can be stopped. And I think that is important. And the Law Society or the Legal Practice Council will have to look at whether or not this particular attorney have brought the profession in disrepute. But I can say that at the end of the day, the type of conduct and the questioning is sadly what victims of survivors of sexual violence have to go through on a daily basis. And that is the sad reality. Like I've said before, we need some serious transformation on how we conduct sexual offences matters, which is why the Women's Legal Center and other organizations through coalitions like the Shukamisa have insisted that the Department of Justice must implement or ensure that there is sexual offences courts, because we need specialist prosecutors, specialist magistrates, specialist psychologists and social workers to be able to manage these particular courts. And we can see this through the conduct of what was happening in this particular court. That is why there will be special equipment that is even put in place in these courts to ensure that this type of questioning doesn't happen at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, the failure of the prosecutor in this case to actually, state prosecutor that is, to raise objections and intervene is one part of what perhaps needs improvement. One hates to think of what would have happened had the judge himself also not objected, because I think that the judge's objection did a lot to mobilize our society and get us where we are now on this particular incident. How confident are you that the legal professions, like society, can also play a role? And if so, what kind of a role can it really play in ensuring that no one ever again does what a Doberman here did?
Well, I mean, the Law Society, through disciplinary committee or the Legal Practice Council, this particular matter can actually sit and to actually see what or how an attorney should conduct itself in relation to victims of or survivors of violence. And they can set a precedent, and which means that if this type of conduct happens in the future, it means that survivors or victims can actually refer these matters to the respective Law Society or the Legal Practice Council. And we can stop this type of questioning in the courts, because we acknowledge that cross-examination uses stereotypes that are to discredit women in sexual violence matters. And it is not necessary to be able to check the veracity of what the witness is saying in this type of matter. We all know in cross-examination what attorneys try to do is to be able to make the person uneasy. They try to make the person emotional, or the person starts crying. And then that is ultimately used, or that type of conduct is actually used against the survivor or victim or that particular witness to discredit them. And this type of questioning should not be allowed, because it's not necessary in relation to there is no legal value to be able to put that level of stereotyping on the victim to be able to say that they are questioning the veracity of that particular statement. So I think it's going to be challenging for the Law Society or the Legal Practice Council, because this is what happens every day. But I think that they will be able to step in and to transform our system to be able to say this type of conduct is not allowed.
Siham Samai, thanks very much for your input. She's the director at Women's Legal Center. Of course, saying really there needs to be more voices and more hands on deck to try and deal what, in essence, is a victimization or further victimization of survivors of these kinds of crimes.